So guys, I want to talk about JD from New York, and I want to do a respond video to something he said about Chris Jericho. And the first of all, like when I do respond videos, I just want to talk about like the person that I'm reviewing a little bit. Like JD from New York, I really like him. He has a lot of like bravado, really great voice, and he's definitely very passionate. And he always talks with a lot of conviction. You know, like as I said, like I have an issue that no matter what I do, um, I sound like a boring college professor. You know, there is a reason why he has like so many subscribers and all that. You know, so congratulations on his work. I also appreciate him being more consistent with whatever he talks about. He's almost like Cornette in a way, where Cornette will do videos daily, or he would do a series of videos, and that's important because there are some people that have really great content, but they'll do it once in a while. So I appreciate JD from New York for being consistent as well, really. So one thing I want to say is that I really agree with everything that he said about Chris Jericho feuding with Boom Boom AJ, and just saying that, you know, it does show that either Tony is a dumbass because honestly, you know, this is not something that people want to see. Boom Boom AJ, they're comedy wrestlers. They're part of an online, you know, like Twitter meme thing. So, you know, there's really no payoff. And then the other thing too is that you have the ROH champion. So what would happen if you have a match and Chris Jericho sides the job to fuck around really? Or what would happen if Chris Jericho just has a 50-50 match with a man who just came back from surgery? It hurts the Ring of Honor title. And then you're also not doing something where you're saying, okay, well, Chris Jericho now has the ROH title. You know, what possible opponents that he can have, really. You know, so I agree with everything that JD from New York is saying. You know, it's a waste of a good utilization of Chris Jericho. There's one thing that I do disagree with. He did say that, you know, with Chris Jericho, he never really elevated anybody. The only person that ever got elevated from him in AEW, in my opinion, is MJF. That MJF needed to transition from, you know, a wrestler with a lot of potential to actually beating like people. So, you know, beating Cody, beating Chris Jericho, beating CM Punk, all that really helped out MJF really. So that's the only benefit that I've seen really. But everybody else, you know, it's been very detrimental. So I think in addition to this video, I want to talk a little bit about like Chris Jericho and where he should go. That I do think that, you know, with the learning tree, I really think you need to have Big Bill versus Chris Jericho. And I think that that would make a really great, you know, ROH, you know, pay-per-view main event, really. And I also really think that another one that I want to see is Dustin Rhodes versus Chris Jericho for the ROH title. And the reason why I want to do that is that you can have Chris Jericho representing what he represents, you know, an old man that has a bunch of people pal around with him like the learning tree, but in the end of the day, he only cares about himself, really. And then you look at Dustin, who runs, like, you know, gyms, and he's mentoring Sammy Guevara, he's mentoring the Von Erichs, he shares the glory with them, he puts in the work, really, and it's not really about him. So it's almost like, you know, the old man that represents, you know, caring about himself versus the old man that represents caring about everybody and saying, you know what, as the ROH champion, as me, Dustin Rhodes, you know what, I'm not gonna retire until I see, you know, the next big guy, really. And you can kind of do Dustin versus Sammy after that. Like there's so much, but you can kind of do that type of thing where it's like, you know, these two old men are kind of fighting for, you know, the crown or the soul of the company, really. Like, you know, like what's the ultimate legacy of Ring of Honor, really? And I think that that would be a powerful feud. But I think the next big feud that you can do, if you don't do that, is Big Bill versus Chris Jericho. And then you have to kind of think about how you're utilizing Chris Jericho. I really think that, in my opinion, that Chris Jericho needs to feud with Big Bill or needs to feud with Dustin Rhodes, really. And then after you do that, Chris Jericho needs to be off of television for like 6 months, really. And he needs a bit of a reset, like kind of think about where he wants to go, really. And I think that that's the best thing for him. That's what I would do, because I think he needs to think about his career. He needs to think about, you know, how there's a lot of criticisms against him. And also, too, that, you know, he's not been a good ROH champion or anything like that, really. Like, he has so much potential. But I think with Chris Jericho, he is one of those people that he really, really needs a boundary. And I want to talk about this. I know I talked about this in another video, but this needs to be said, is that his ROH promo And all that ROH stuff that he did with Matt Cardona was bullshit. Because again, you see him, like going around New York City, eating food and being funny, and it's kind of like what we see with Chris Jericho, that he's really in love with his own humor. You know, and that doesn't help anybody because like we get the joke that Chris Jericho has flanderized himself. He is a rock star with his head up his ass. That's Chris Jericho's gimmick. But he wants everybody kind of being the joke. He wants everybody to ham it up with him. If I was booking his promo, I would say, he would call himself the ROH King, and he would say something like, like I'm the ROH King, and I'm also the King of New York. So what he'll do is that he'll go around New York City, he'll go to these places, he'll say like, what, there's nobody on the roster that can beat me. And then you show clips of, Mark Briscoe, you show clips of Commander, you show clips of, other like babyface wrestlers on the ROH roster, like Matt Cardona, other people that can actually challenge him, and maybe your next generation almost, and even Dustin or Sammy or other people. You kind of like foreshadow future opponents. And then you had the match with Matt Cardona, and that's that really. But he also says, I also call myself the forever champion. You show clips of Athena, and the reason what you're trying to do is that you're even saying something like, hey, he's so arrogant that he's trying to steal Athena's thunder, as well, really. And then you kind of can say, okay, well, everybody in that video, we're doing some foreshadowing. There'll be future opponents. You have Chris Jericho versus Big Bill. You have Chris Jericho versus Dustin. You have Chris Jericho versus Sammy. You have Chris Jericho versus Matt Cardona. You have Chris Jericho versus other people in the ROH roster. Maybe Dalton Castle. Maybe Mark Briscoe one more time. Maybe you bring Powerhouse Hobbs or a couple other people who need some work. Maybe a Ricky Starks or something like that. It's like what I've said. It's unfortunate, but there's so much untouched potential in AEW. But again, they're almost like TNA wrestling, where the thing is that they have a lot of things that they can do well with if they just know how to use it right. They just use things very, very poorly. They're almost like somebody making a smoothie. You know what? They're too big about putting ice cream and strawberries and banana and milk together and making and like almond milk and making that. That's a smoothie, but that's not a good smoothie. But putting kale and banana and maybe hemp and other things is a better smoothie. Like, I just think that it's like what I said, they always are working with what they have very poorly. And very poorly is Chris Jericho. And I really think that, as I said, I really think that Chris Jericho wants to do what he wants to do. He's kind of at that point in his career where he's like, okay, you know what, wrestling is silly, wrestling's a joke. So if I have fun with it, I don't really give a fuck, because wrestling is not, it's a form of entertainment. It's not real. So if I can ham it up, I'll ham it up, really. And that's not the Chris Jericho that we want. And as I said, that's almost like with Tony. Tony Khan went from this hardworking, ambitious, I want to take on WWE, I want to be this underdog, I want to just accomplish big things, to this Twitter bitch. And now we see Chris Jericho being this guy that disagreed with WWE, felt like he's done enough, he wants to build another legacy in AEW, but now he's transformed into, Mr. Ham It Up, really. And the other things he has to understand is that even though he gets a reaction from people, and even though there's people on his side, or there's people that may say you're a heel because it gets attention, that's not the right attention. There's two types of heel. There's a heel that works like Roman Reigns or Roddy Piper or Stone Cold Steve Austin that draw money and get attention, or Randy Orton. And then there's get the fuck off of television heel, which is Chris Jericho in AEW, Dixie Carter in TNA, the Aces and Eights in TNA. You can even argue when Roman Reigns was babyface in WWE with how that turned off a lot of people, really. And Jericho falls in that, and it's like what I've said, that you look at the Manhattan Center and I've not even looked up how many people they got from Ring of Honor. At one point last year, Ring of Honor was doing over 8,000 people at their pay-per-views. Most people don't know most people don't even know that Athena and other people are in Ring of Honor. and they're actually on the AEW roster because not a lot of people talk about it. Chris Jericho, his job is to revitalize, Ring of Honor, and that's what I feel his role is. But he's not going to live up to that, and Tony's not going to expect a lot from him. So it's very problematic, and there are easy ways to fix this. Like I said, he really needs to start instigating, and he really needs to start creating feuds with a lot of different people, and he needs to be held to a higher standard. But both things I don't think Tony's going to do, and we're all going to suffer for that. And he also, and as I said, that he's in love with his comedy, so he's not going to meet somebody that says, "Okay, motherfucker, yeah, you can do this thing with Big Boom AJ, maybe at World's End or whatever. We can do something funny with you because you know what, it's close to the pay-per-view. We want to sell it. We know that they're from the area, but after that, for the rest of 2025, you need to be a serious ROH champion, and you need to elevate people. Here's a list of people you're going to elevate with the title, and you're going to do that. And if not, we're not going to renew your contract, or we're going to tell you to go home, really." Like I said, I think AEW needs a better director, and a director to say, Chris Jericho, you need to be what you were a few years ago, which was somebody who disagreed with WWE, who wanted a more ambitious and legacy in another company. Really, you need to be that Chris Jericho, and ultimately, it doesn't matter what you feel about yourself. You know what, you do suck, Chris Jericho. You do suck. You are not funny. People are into your humor, but that's a dwindling crowd, really. And you need to have a standard for yourself. And if you don't expect a standard from yourself, really, you know what? You're not going to have that great of a legacy. You're going to be just like The Simpsons. You were once great, but your standard has dropped, really. So with JD from New York, I agree with everything that motherfucker is saying.